Okay, what we have here is a 5-year-old spreader. Actually, it might even be older than that. And we're going to do some routine maintenance. This is the end of our snow season. And as you can see, there's lots of salt on the truck. And it's all over the spreader still. And so what we're going to do is show you how to maintain your spreader after the season is out. As you can see, the inside of the spreader has some use to it. We're going to show you how to maintain it, how to maintain the motor, throttles, and spinner systems so that you can handle the next season when it comes around. First thing we're going to do though is we're going to clean off the spreader. As you can see, there's gunked up salt and dirt in areas. We're going to clean it off good with like a power washer. And when we're done there, we'll come back and show you the basic maintenance steps for this. Okay, what we're doing here is cleaning off the spreader. As you can see, we've taken the shield off because salt does get inside areas that you can't get at, so that should be cleaned out. We're just washing it off with a hose. We'll take the remaining salt, put that in other areas. Okay, first maintenance is that we're going to take care of the chute, and we need to make sure the spinner bearings are free, so we've loosened the chute down away from the spreader. And the next thing we're going to do is check the spin of the bearings, make sure that they're free. Also, we're going to take a look inside, make sure everything isn't all rusted up to death. And it has a free spin to it, but we're still going to add some grease to it in the grease ports. There's an upper and a lower grease port. This is probably one of the most important things. If you're having issues with the grease getting in, then you need to take a look at the bearing. It may be spinning fine right now, but if you cannot get grease to go in, then you have problems with the bearing, which may go the next season. So next step is we're going to take this whole chute off, get it ready for storage, and we're going to take a look at the engine compartment area. Okay, what we're doing here is cleaning off. There is some salt that can accumulate on top of the bearing. The best thing to do is not try to blast it out with water, because you will actually drive the salt water right into the bearing. Better thing to do is to try to clean it off with an air gun, or wipe it off like we're doing here. The other thing that is very helpful for these bearings is to just coat the top with like a grease barrier, so when the salt hits it, it doesn't penetrate into the bearing, it just deflects down. One of the major reasons why our bearing's not having issues is because there has been a grease layer on top of it. Again, this is a very old spreader. This is almost 5 years. Okay, next we're going to take a look at the engine compartment, and we're going to do basic maintenance on the engine itself, the throttle linkage. We're going to check the oil, we're going to check the gas, we're going to check the chain drive, make sure everything's lubed up. One of the major problems that you'll run into is that this chain right here, if it's not lubed properly with all the moisture and the salt falling down on it, can rust up solid. Now I feel there's grease on here, however what we're going to do is we're going to make sure it's been oiled up and lubed very well. Additionally, this linkage up in here for the throttle can become rusted up solid, so we need to make sure everything is moving, and before we finally get this engine put to rest, we have to maintain the chain underneath. So it's better to have the engine running, and we can engage the clutch and so on, so the chain can be moved and we can lube that, and once that's all done, then we're going to run the engine dry. Okay, we're doing some general look over on the motor, and obviously one of the main concerns is that we want it to start the next time. So we want to make sure that the connections are not all corroded and white. We also want to make sure that the connection on the from the battery, the ground loop, is not rusted, and that it actually is not corroding as well. We're looking at any electrical connection to make sure that it's not get rusted solid. What we do is we spray like a lubrication, like a battery covering grease, and we spray each connection so that it can actually be loosened. As you can see, ours are in pretty good shape. They're not corroded or anything like that. The next step is to look at all the connections between the motor, the throttle motor, and make sure that they're not corroded as well. The next thing we're going to do here is just test the throttle motor. You see what we got for throttle movement. Okay, what we just heard there was a clutch engaged. Alright, go the other way. Okay, everything appears to be moving. Most important is the choke. Make sure that moves. What we're going to do is still spray each linkage. We're going to grab some WD-40 or a silicone lubricant, and we're going to spray each linkage to make sure it's ready to go next season. Okay, what we're doing is spraying each movable linkage in the governor mechanism, and basically what we have is a throttle. Actually, this is the choke right here. Back here's the throttle, and then we're going to lube up this track here. As you saw before, everything was moving pretty well, but we want to make sure that everything is still moving. One final check is to make sure that the recoil actually is coming back. If it's giving any trouble, then you're going to have to try to spray some lube up inside there. That's one way. But the other way is to actually remove this whole cover. Actually, on this one you don't have to. You can remove just these little bolts, and then you can spray some lube in there and make sure the whole thing's spinning well. Okay, what we've got here is the chains that we're looking at. We have the upper chain for the drive, and then we have the lower chain for driving the spinner drive. Both chains need to be looked at and thoroughly lubed. The lower chain is the one most susceptible to corrosion, and the only way to really get at that is to turn the engine on. So what we're going to do here is pre-lube the chain up top. We can do that by manually pulling on it and getting each spot of the chain lubed up. What we have here is like a rust preventative lubricant so that it penetrates into the chain. The important thing about a chain is to make sure it actually gets into the links. Otherwise, you're really just surface coating it and you're not really helping it at all. So we've got the top one lubed, but the bottom one, we're going to have to run it. So we're going to fire it up and lube it, and when we come back we'll show. Okay, what we're doing here is lubing the chain underneath, making sure it's spinning properly. We also want to make sure it's lubed up top here too. Next thing we're going to do is lube up the main chain. So we'll get up there and lube it. Okay, when we're lubing the chain here, you need to make sure that you get every link. You may run through several cans of fluid trying to get this lubed up right. You also want to make sure it's not wet with water or anything like that when you store it. What we have here is oil. This is not water. I'll make sure it's lubed up well. It ain't gonna stick solid. We're gonna do both sides. Again, it's important that you get lube in the links. So it's going to take several times to go around. Okay, what we're doing here is checking the oil on the gearbox. What we do is we pull the, you can pull either plug. We chose the larger one. I'm not sure what size socket that is. But bottom line is you pull it, the oil should be at that level. If some starts coming out right away, then you know you got enough. Put it back in. Also check the color of it, make sure it's not burned looking. It does come in a darker color when it's delivered. It's more like that is a clearness to it. Here, I'll show you. That's fine. It's not like it's got grit in it. You're looking for like bits of metal. It has brass gears in there too. So what you're looking for is like gold looking flakes or copper looking flakes in there. If there's a lot of that, you might be overworking your gearbox. Next thing we're going to do is slap some grease on this upper nipple up here. It greases the top bearing. Since we're doing the greasing mode on the main spreader, we're going to go around grease every bearing that's on this spreader. We're going to start from the back and go around the whole thing. So the next bearings we're going to hit are these spinner shaft bearings. And basically you just keep squeezing it. You see it start coming out, that's a good thing. If it ain't coming out, then you got a problem with the bearing. Okay, if it's just coming out, for instance, just around the nipple and the nipple's clogged. So we're going to go grease the back bearings way in the, actually this one here, you're right. And then there are two main back bearings. Okay, so now we're going to go finish this off, grease the main. Okay, and he's going to do the other side and we're done with greasing. Okay, what we're doing here is checking the flow gate, make sure that the whole mechanism is lubed up and isn't rusting. That handle, that knob there can get rusted up pretty good, so we're going to hit it with some lube, make sure it spins in and out pretty good. Every joint's going to be lubed. Even the interface points will be lubed to make sure everything's moving right. If you don't do this every year or periodically, even during the season, you're going to have issues. Okay. What we're doing here is checking the oil level on the engine, make sure that the oil's good color. We haven't run it a whole lot. And it actually has color to it still. The level's pretty good. It's not black, and it's pretty decent. We may change it next season, but right now we're just going to leave it. Okay, on this engine there is no shutoff valve, but if there were a shutoff valve, what we would recommend is that you shut the valve off on the gas line, pour some Sta-Bil into the gas, whatever's left over, so that it can sit for long periods of time. And then on the engine side, we're going to run it dry as best as we can, so that the whatever's in the carburetor is gone. We can do secondary measures where we can actually kind of dismantle the carb, but the easiest way is to run it dry. Okay, what we're going to do now is turn on the choke full blast. We drained the gas out of the tank. We're looking for is this arm to come up, and as you can see, it pushed it and put it in full choke. So what we're going to do is start the engine up and run it. And it's important it's run on choke because it's going to just drain the gas right out of the carburetor. There's no gas in any of the lines, and it takes about a minute for it to just completely run down. You know that you've come to the end when it starts to run faster because now it's going to lean out the mixture. pretty darn close. Whatever's left in there will vaporize. We can try starting it one more time just to make sure. Typically it's pretty much out. Now it's just a matter of putting the spreader away and storing it. Alright, we got the spreader ready to take off the truck. We've got all the harnesses unplugged, and we're going to, in this instance, we're going to use a forklift to actually get into the side of the spreader. It's important that you take the spreader off where the center of gravity is, and that's typically a little bit farther forward on these spreaders, otherwise they'll tip forward. As you can see, he's biasing to where he's picking it up to the front area if he can. Sometimes you don't really have a choice. You can actually come at it from the top of the chain and a rope, chain and a hoisting system. And we got her down. If you were to take it off using a chain, you just put it on the hook there. Now, one thing that we want to comment about is where you store it. We're going to be storing our unit inside, but if you don't have any room inside to store it, be sure to cover it with a tarp to keep the elements, the rain and so forth off it.